Hello again everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are headed out on another Mach Loop Time Trial in an aircraft which I'm sure needs absolutely no introduction. We are of course looking at the Franco-British supersonic airliner that is Concorde. Further to that, we are once again celebrating a little video milestone here on the channel. I recently had not just one but two Concorde videos past the 100,000 view mark. That's really great to see. It's nice to know as well that the old bird can still draw in plenty of attention. Anyway, in celebration of that, and indeed in celebration of Concorde herself, we're going to be taking the aircraft around the Mach Loop. For those of you unfamiliar with the time trial series, we're going to be taking Concorde around the Mach Loop. We'll time our run as we go, and then we'll see how Concorde compares to the other aircraft that we've run on the loop to date. It is worth stressing as well though, don't expect to see the aircraft going around the run at speeds in excess of Mach 2. I like to try and make the runs with a reasonable degree of realism, so we'll be trying to operate the aircraft broadly within its limitations. Nevertheless, hopefully it should be good fun seeing what this iconic supersonic aircraft can achieve, and for sure it's a run that I've been looking forward to personally. For today's outing we're going to be using the Colimata Concorde within X-Plane 11. I know that generally my Microsoft Flight Simulator runs are preferred, but I wanted to use a version of the aircraft that really does Concorde justice, and the Colimata version is a much more realistic representation of Concorde overall. That should hopefully make the run again a bit more accurate, and I think hopefully more interesting as well. Anyway, as usual, we'll get the aircraft airborne, we'll make our way north up towards the Mach Loop. En route, we'll talk a little bit about Concorde, and then we'll commence our run. As always guys, if you do enjoy the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Let's kick the tyres, light the fires, and we'll be on our way. So once again, I'm sure that for the vast majority of you, Concorde is an aircraft that needs absolutely no introduction. Nevertheless, we will talk a little bit about the airframe here as we make our way up towards the Mach Loop. Concorde is of course the Franco-British supersonic airliner jointly developed by both Aerospatiale and BAC. The aircraft actually came into existence as a result of both the French and the British governments signing a treaty establishing the development of a supersonic jet airliner. The programme was initially estimated to cost around £70 million, which in today's money is around 1.4 billion. As with the vast majority of government projects though, that didn't quite work out, and instead the project came to around 1.5 to 2.1 billion pounds in 1976's money. Today that works out to be somewhere around 10 to 13 billion pounds. Construction of the first 6 prototypes of the aircraft began in February of 1965, and Concorde first took to the skies from Toulouse on the 2nd of March 1969. The market was originally predicted for 350 airframes, with manufacturers receiving 100 options from various major airlines around the world. Of course though, in reality, sadly Concorde never achieved that level of success. Concorde, of course, is an iconic and timeless design. It's a tailless delta-wing aircraft, its narrow fuselage permitting 4 abreast seating for between 92 and 128 passengers. Powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Olympus 593 turbojets, the aircraft was able to achieve speeds up to Mach 2.04 and achieve an altitude of 60,000 feet. Of course, both Air France and British Airways operated the aircraft, each owning 7 airframes, but whilst the supersonic airliner accomplished everything that it set out to achieve, sadly, the aircraft being limited only to transoceanic flights at supersonic speed due to the supersonic boom created by the aircraft meant that in the end Concorde's utility was somewhat limited. Nevertheless, Concorde had a long and distinguished life, its first flight again taking place on the 2nd of March 1969, and the aircraft landing for the final time at her home airport of Bristol-Filton on the 26th of November 2003. I think it's going to make for a fairly interesting run here taking Concorde around the Mach Loop. We're actually going to be more limited on speed than you might imagine. V&E down at sea level is only around 330 knots, so nothing particularly special. The aircraft is actually a real joy to fly though, so I think it's going to be pretty easy to make our way around the run. And of course, although we may be lacking in top speed, we've got plenty of excess thrust on board the aircraft, so we should have absolutely no issues when it comes to acceleration. Anyway, we are just approaching the Mach Loop, so let's head for the cockpit and we'll begin our run. So welcome back to the flight deck of Concorde, just approaching the start of the Mach Loop, just coming out abeam the town of Abu Dhabi. A few little housekeeping items to run through before we start. First we'll get the visor closed up. I figure that's obviously going to reduce our visibility throughout the run, but it should at least reduce our drag as well. Got about 35 tonnes to play with here on the Mach Loop in terms of fuel. We'll get rid of the autopilot, flight director and auto throttle can go off. We'll get the afterburners on, we're only going to need those though if we really let the speed drop back. And we'll put the aircraft here into a descent. We're actually going to roll back off the throttles here. You can see that V&E is only around 360 knots and falling. So we need to really make sure here that we don't pick up too much speed Nonetheless, we want to be right up at V&E as we start the run. So keeping about half throttle for now, aiming to cross the road at around 300 knots. You can see Mach Loop there off at our 1 o'clock. So we'll be commencing the run very shortly. Cracking day for it, really good visibility. A little bit of cloud cover, but well above the tops of the hills. So there's our 300 knots, V&E slowly coming up to meet us there, so just coming back off the throttles again. And just banking the aircraft there so we can see the road and the start of the run. Over the road, so we'll start the stopwatch. Straight away we can come up on the power there, we've lost a little bit of speed there in the bank. Looks like V&E's around 310 knots, so we'll keep the speed pegged there for now. Got about 25% throttle on at the moment, I would say. 305 knots as we make our way down the valley. And the aircraft wanting to pitch up a little bit here, so just a little bit of forward trim. 307 knots, right up against V&E. We can probably just apply a touch more throttle there. We've got about 88% N2, there's V&E, so coming back off the throttle. We'll be nudging up right against that throughout the entirety of the run. We've got the B404 just down below us on the left, following the river as well. The B404 bridge just coming up, and the town of Glantwimmin there off on our right. 305 knots. And we're going to try and make all of our turns as shallow as we can throughout the run. Partially to avoid bleeding off any speed, but also, of course, trying not to overstress the airframe. Concorde's certainly not really designed for this type of flying. So hugging the corner here for now, just cutting down a little bit on our distance in terms of our overall run. And getting the aircraft lined up against the hill down at the other end of the valley there for our turn over Dinas Malthui. There's our V&E warning light again, back at 0.47 in terms of our Mach number, so we'll just reduce our throttle again slightly here. Just let some of that speed bleed off. We don't have any spoilers, but if we really need, we do have the reversers. We shouldn't need those for the run though. So speed looking good. Nicely lined up with the hill. We're going to start an early left turn here again, just to avoid pulling too much G here as we come around the corner. And coming up on the throttle to try and maintain the speed here as we do pull a little bit of G and bleed off a few knots here in the bank. Just shallowing up the turn there a little bit to make sure we don't clip the side of the hill. And really hugging the side of the hill there as we come through Dinas Malthui. A little bit faster again on the speed, so all the way back off the throttle. Bank angle warning there from our flight engineer. I'm not sure he knows what we're actually up to today. Feeding in a lot of power again now. We've bled off quite a bit of speed here in the turn, back to around 290 knots. So back up to around 310. Really just juggling the throttle there to try and maintain that airspeed indicator needle right on the edge of the V&E needle. Reversing the turn here as we come up through bulkhead exit. As soon as we crest the hill there, we can start coming back off the throttle. And reversing a turn back round to the left, coming down the side of the hill. Speed looking good, really just having to constantly monitor that airspeed indicator, making sure we're not overspeeding the aircraft. Coming up towards Cross Foxes Inn. Other than the speed though, Concorde an absolute joy to fly around the loop, I have to say. Very responsive on the controls. Surprisingly so, as we pick up the A487 here to head down towards Llyn-Min-Gil. And we bled off a ton of speed there in the turn, so back up on the throttle. Actually just getting the afterburners in there momentarily. We can afford to lose a little bit of speed here in the turns because we can obviously very quickly accelerate again with Concorde's afterburners. Speed looking good as we come down the other side of the hill, lining ourselves up with Llyn-Min-Gil. And again we'll make an early start to our turn here through Corus, just to avoid pulling too much G. Speed looking good. So far we've done a reasonable job at keeping just below V&E or thereabouts. We did just lose a few knots more than I would have liked as we came over bulkhead exit. Again losing quite a bit of speed here in the turn, so really coming back up on those throttles. Back to around 300 knots, reversing the turn as we come up towards Corus. Bank angle warning again there from the flight engineer, speed a little bit high, just coming up over the town of Corus all the way back to idle on the throttle, and feeding in some power again now as we come back towards V&E. Only got about 20% power on here if that at the moment, 315 knots. We're going to
Obviously build up a little bit more speed here as we come down the hill. And actually as we lose altitude here, V&E coming up to meet us as well. All the way back to idle power now, speed just about within limits. And speed slowly falling off here, but V&E again slowly creeping down as well, 300 knots. Just as we come down the last stretch of the run. There's Mach just coming to meet us off the nose. And over the road, stopping the stopwatch. Overall, really enjoyed that, an absolutely cracking run out in Concorde.
So there you go, guys. I do hope you enjoyed our run around the Mach Loop in Concorde. Once again, I think the Colimata version of Concorde is a really nice rendition of the aircraft. It's an absolute joy to fly and operate, and whilst X-Plane 11 doesn't hold up quite as well graphically to Microsoft Flight Simulator, I think you can see from our run, and I certainly feel that the sim can still hold its own overall. Anyway, Concorde managed a time of 4 minutes 46.47 seconds, actually meaning that rather surprisingly Concorde lost out not only to a fellow Delta-winged flyer, the Avro Vulcan, but also to the Lockheed L1011 TriStar. You would have thought perhaps there that the afterburners would have been enough to give us an edge, and certainly the Vulcan's handling characteristics at high speed were pretty atrocious. Nevertheless, the Vulcan was capable of a higher top speed, and the same goes there for the TriStar. So once again, as with our previous run in the Dark Star, it really goes to prove that an aircraft designed for high altitude, high speed flight is not necessarily a complete powerhouse down at low level. Concorde's V&E certainly meant that we were a little bit hampered on our run today, but nevertheless the aircraft a complete joy to fly. Great fun putting the aircraft around the loop, looking through that visor, and hopefully as well you enjoyed the external shots there at the end. Hopefully a flight you all enjoyed. Once again, I think it was a fairly interesting run. If you did like the video, then please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. As ever, my sincere thanks to everybody who supports the channel financially, namely my channel members and patrons. It's very much appreciated. I do hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.